Greetings, everyone. My name is Gabriel Santos, and I'm a paleontologist and educator from a little museum up on a hill known as the Raymond M. Alf Museum of Paleontology, nearby in a small town known as Claremont. Now, I absolutely love my job because every day we get the chance to share the story of life on Earth. We get to show the incredible depth of time and how, even though your time in the universe is but a blip, your moment, matters. What will you do with your moment in time, as our founder Ray Alf would ask? Now, I'm more than just a paleontologist. When I'm not talking about paleontology and natural history, I like to partake in nerdy activities. I love comics, video games, Star Wars. But one of my more recent and loved hobbies is something called cosplay. Cosplay, coming from the words costume and play, is the art and practice of dressing up as a character from a movie, TV show, anime, or video game. So, standing up here as a paleontologist, educator, and cosplayer, I'm sure you're wondering, what do these things have in common? Well, deep at their core, they all revolve around stories. As a paleontologist, I look at the evidence left behind by extinct creatures, interpret that evidence, and then tell its story so that we can learn about the past. As an educator, I take complex science stories, condense them, refine them, and make them accessible to wider audiences. As a cosplayer, I connect to beloved stories in pop culture and bring them to life, whether I'm a superhero, a trainer of monsters, or a space knight with a glowing sword. Still, I'm sure you're wondering, how do these things and stories all connect? Well, what if there was a way we could use pop culture stories and cosplay for education by weaving in science stories? What if we could take something like Jurassic Park, build a traveling exhibit out of it, then bring that exhibit to communities where education may not normally be a part of, but the love for Jurassic Park already exists? What if we could help audiences remember scientific concepts better by relating those concepts to the characters, stories, and settings that they love and engage with every day? What if, through stories, we could inspire critical thinking and help audiences think bigger about their moment of time? Help them learn to ask the right kind of questions, not just in fictional worlds, but in ours. I know this sounds a little crazy, but I don't think so. Since long ago, stories have not only recorded history, but have guided us through it. Stories inspire us and shape our future. After all, it's been said that stories and storytelling are the most powerful way to put ideas into the world. In this case, science ideas. That is how the Cosplay for Science initiative was formed. The Cosplay for Science initiative is a STEAM-powered education initiative, STEAM standing for science, technology, arts, and mathematics, and our idea is that scientists and educators can teach science through the use of pop culture, play, and storytelling. As scientists and educators, we're developing a methodology to make science more accessible and relatable. As cosplayers, we help make scientists much more approachable by showing the diversity of backgrounds and fields. Whether we're talking about spaceflight dressed as X-Wing pilots, genetics as superpowered teenagers, or how potion making is just chemistry for wizards, our goal with the Cosplay for Science initiative is to help our communities and fellow nerds find and appreciate the science in their everyday lives and interests. Now, any good nerd will tell you that every good team-up has an origin story. For our origin story, the Cosplay for Science initiative was formed when some of my best friends, Brittany, Michelle, and Isaac, got together after attending a comic book convention dressed as Jurassic Park characters for our museums. And we realized that audiences were much more inclined to engage with us when, one, we talked about science through the lens of something that they loved, and two, they didn't realize we were scientists until after we told them. They only thought of us as other cosplayers they could connect with on a personal level. From that moment, we realized that we had something. We had a way to bring science to many more people in settings not normally used for education. See, we love our jobs, not just because we're employed scientists, but sometimes, for whatever reason, it can be a challenge to get our communities interested in learning about science, even within the walls of our own museum. In this age of instant information and technology, There's a lot educators have to compete with out there, especially with pop culture. But with the Cosplay for Science initiative, we no longer compete with it. We embrace it and make it our ally. So, how does this work? Well, imagine you're on Instagram and scrolling through, and you come across a picture of me, dressed as a wilderness explorer from the movie Up, and looking kind of lost in a cave. With just that single image, I can now share a story about geology and a wilderness explorer trying to get their geology badge. I can incorporate facts about geology, like how limestone is formed from the fossilized remains of tiny marine creatures, or how caves are formed because groundwater is slightly acidic and slowly dissolves away the stone. Scroll even further down your Insta, and then you find a picture of a PhD chemistry student, Kellen. Kellen's dressed as a character known as Princess Bubblegum from the Adventure Time series. In that world, Princess Bubblegum isn't only a princess, but a genius scientist and inventor as well. She's also made a bubblegum. As a chemist, Kellen can now share a story about the science behind bubblegum, candy, how sugar breaks down in our bodies for energy. As a cosplayer, she can develop a connection and show scientists, both fictional and real, in a personal and positive way. And these were just two easy ways we've shared science stories with pictures. The Cosplay for Science initiative's most successful approach to education have been our pop-up museums. Pop-up museums are traveling exhibits that we can bring to many places and develop around a theme in pop culture by weaving in science stories. Take, for example, our Pokemon Natural History Museum. In the world of Pokemon, there are Pokemon that existed millions of years ago, but now only exist as fossils. For Pokemon trainers to catch them all, they have to find these fossils and then revive them. But for the millions of trainers across the globe, many never realized that some of their favorite Pokemon were inspired by real-life fossils and extinct creatures. So, by taking that connection, building an exhibit with real fossils that inspired Pokemon, and dressing up as Pokemon scientists, we can bring natural history and paleontology to a comic book convention. We can bridge the connection between fantasy worlds and the real one and help audiences think bigger about their world. You know what? It's working. Comic-Con goers love it. They see our fossils, Pokeballs, and cosplays, and they want to ask us questions. They're astounded to see real-life fossils, and even more astounded to find out that their favorite Pokemon were inspired by real-life animals. So when it comes to pop-up museums, the possibilities of stories and education are as endless as the multiverse. We've built pop-up museums inspired by Game of Thrones, looking at the animals that inspired the sigils of Westeros. Our first pop-up museum was Jurassic Park. My personal favorite has been our Star Wars-inspired Galactic Archive, where we show creatures from a galaxy far, far away. We talk about how these creatures evolved and adapted in fictional environments. Then, we bring it back home to Earth by showing the animals, environments, and evolutionary pathways that inspired the fantasy ones. Now, this is a lot of fun, right? But how do we know that our stories are helping people learn about science? And how do we show everyone else that we aren't just a bunch of nerds who found a way to go to Comic-Con for work? Well, like any good scientist, we've been taking notes. Since starting 2 years ago, the Cosplay for Science initiative has attended 15 Comic-Cons and community events. At our first convention, when we were still figuring things out, we interacted with 600 people. That's twice as many people that I could ever dream of fitting in one of my museum events. At our more recent con, we engaged with 4,206 people over the course of 3 days. And that's just counting engagements of 30 seconds or more. And at that same con, we were able to survey about 55 people just to see how we were doing. And we found out that 60% of the people we interviewed were now interested in learning about natural history. 68% said that they were excited to see educational programming at a comic book convention. And 44% said that they were now more likely to approach a scientist and ask them a question when they wouldn't have beforehand. And with that, even though it's just a small sample, gave us evidence that we really might be onto something here. So, looking into the future, We have big plans. Already, the Cosplay for Science initiative has added scientists from all different backgrounds and fields. We have biologists, chemists, physicists, neuroscientists as part of the team. We have an official research team to look at how pop culture affects our perceptions of science so that we can better engage with our scientists. We even have a K through 12 team to help us bring the initiative into classrooms. We're kind of like becoming the Avengers, but with science. And in education, there lie our powers. We fight for a better future where science and critical thinking guide our everyday. Imagine it like this. Let's say next month, we bring one of our pop-up museums to your kids' schools. We share a story about a planet affected by millions of years of pollution and climate change. Your student asks us a question about how the inhabitants of this planet are affected by climate change. We answer and we have a great exchange. We share our love of science and their love of Star Wars. We build a connection. We build trust in our stories, our science, and us. But then we go our separate ways. Later, your student and their friends are at home watching Star Wars, and they remembered what they learned from our stories and start to share the story again with their friends. Even later, they're watching another science fiction show, again with a planet affected by climate change. They start to ask the same questions that they asked in a galaxy far, far away. Even later, they're in class discussing climate change, and they start to think about how climate change affects us. They start to think critically about the real world, all because they learned to ask the right questions in a fictional one. And in the end, when their moment comes to make a decision that could affect the future of our world, we hope that the stories we shared and the trust we built guide them to make the right one.